And again, welcome to this SAP Community Call. My name is Menina Chow. I'm part of the community team, your host today, and I'm very happy that we have today Johannes Weber with us. He's Solution Manager for the automotive for SAP E-Mobility, and he's helping automotive companies enabling comprehensive end-to-end mobility scenarios with SAP's Industry Cloud for automotive. And he's here with us to hold a session about how to drive the transition towards a sustainable future with SAP E-Mobility, and of course to answer your questions if you have any. So before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is muted from start, but we're happy to unmute you towards the end of the call. Feel free to post your questions during the presentation. You should be able to see the Q&A window as well as the chat area. So interact with us, enjoy the presentation, and post your questions. With that, I'm very happy to hand over to Johannes for his presentation.
Thank you very much, Menina. Welcome everyone from my side. So my name is Johannes Weber. I'm part of the global automotive practice here at SAP and responsible as solution manager for our SAP E-Mobility solution. So I will talk to you today about the topic of how to drive the transition towards a sustainable future with SAP E-Mobility. And I'm really happy to introduce to you our all new SAP E-Mobility solution in more detail. The solution is generally available since September 24th this year. And well, we will probably not need all of the time assigned for today's presentation, so there will be enough room also for your questions at the end of this session. Before we start, I need you to make aware of the following disclaimer. So certain content of what you will see is forward-looking, meaning that some features, functions, and capabilities of SAP E-Mobility will not yet be available and are subject to change at any time without any further notice. So please be aware, if you make any decisions in terms of product purchasing decision, this should not be based on the content on what you see today. Anyhow, all of the forward-looking statements and solution screenshots are marked with a sticker, SAP Labs or Solution Vision. So you will see that explicitly on the slides. Also, we kindly ask you not to forward these presentations without any approval. Let's have a look, a quick overview of today's agenda. So first of all, I would like to set the stage and talk a little bit about the current market developments and dynamics, specifically in view also of the theme of sustainability. Second, I will focus on our SAP E-Mobility solution, including an overview of the EV charging value chain, the roles and important players. And in the last part, I will take your questions and hopefully be able to answer all of them. So electric mobility is a megatrend. Electric mobility or e-mobility represents the concept of using an electric powertrain to enable electric driving of vehicles. So more and more automotive OEMs offer pure battery electric vehicles, BEVs, and the electric vehicle market and charging infrastructure has become a more than double-digit billion-euro market. With increasing battery capacities, electric vehicles become more and more attractive to the end customers, which becomes visible in the increasing sales figures of the BEVs. So electrification is clearly shaping the future of mobility. At the same time, companies face to pay significant costs in view of the reduction of their CO2 footprint and also emissions. However, many businesses struggle to reduce their environmental impact. With regulations on CO2 emissions tightening and on the other side, the tax benefits for electric vehicles, we see more companies electrifying their corporate fleets. But with selling more and more electric cars, the demand for charging infrastructure, private and public, is increasing. So governments are gearing up and putting large infrastructure plans into action and subsidizing the charging infrastructure development, with one goal: to make the transition from the traditional fossil fuel car toward enabling a CO2 neutral way of mobility. The time for climate action is now. So these trends are really shifting the markets, and sustainability is not just a buzzword or a trend anymore. So under the theme of industry convergence of utilities, automotives, and oil and gas, especially automotive and utilities industries are racing into a new world of electrified mobility and sustainable energy. The oil and gas industry, historically producing the fossil fuels, the energy resource of the 24th century, are shifting their business models drastically towards becoming sustainable companies and offering now also CO2 neutral products and services. So there is a big shift in utilities towards renewable and also more decentralized energy creation. It's a gigantic energy transition and sector coupling. But coming back to electric mobility, so what are the prerequisites for making mobility sustainable? And in order to reach a clean and green mobility, not only further technological advancements in the battery development and production are required. So if you think about the amount of energy required to produce a battery, or the amount of rare earth material which is required for a high performance battery in a car, it's still extremely high today. Also with respect to where the energy to charge a car is coming from. If the main energy resources are still coal, gas, or nuclear power, the exhaust pipe of your electric car has just been displaced from the back of your car towards the emissions of the next power plant. So electric mobility therefore needs to be powered by renewable energy produced by sustainable energy resources to be truly sustainable. These challenges will for sure be overcome and managed. Yet charging in comparison to refueling a conventional car is very much different. So it takes longer, it's more complicated, needs to be managed and also administered. Providing an easy and pleasant customer experience when charging the car, however, is an important key aspect for the mass adoption of electrical vehicles. But how can we provide such an easy and pleasant experience for charging a car when the processes look like this? So first of all, I don't want to scare you. I'm not going to explain that picture in detail. This is just to provide an overview of how many different players are involved in various charging processes and how complex the business processes behind the charging events can look like. There are many different players involved in a simple charging my car on an external Chargepoint event. And this illustrates how the topic of electric vehicle charging is an organically evolved market, which is fragmented and now consolidated. To provide some examples, we see various charging hardware with different types of hardware cables and plugs used. So the Type 2, for example, or the CCS is the established standard now in Europe, whereas the Type 1 plug has prevailed in the US, for example. Additionally, very heterogeneous software backends for operating charging infrastructure are in use. So also depending on the different use cases and the different charging scenarios. Some regulatory requirements come as an additional challenge. So for example, compliance with calibration laws in German Einrechtskonformität in view of financial and tax compliance needs to be ensured. And this gets even more challenging when the charging takes place across borders. So this is a complicated picture and when looking at the business processes behind the physical charge point. So one of the biggest challenges for companies is not only to manage the charging infrastructure, the assets, but also the business processes and the operations at scale. And depending on the charging scenario, an interplay of various other players such as external e-mobility service providers, charge point operators, or e-roaming providers is required. These processes need to be orchestrated and connected to provide a seamless charging experience for the end customer, the electric vehicle driver. So let me share with you what our thoughts are and how we address these challenges with our e-mobility solution. So with SAP E-Mobility, SAP provides an industry cloud solution to build, run, and manage electric vehicle charging networks with integration into the SAP Intelligence Suite to run charging business processes on one platform. It is a pure cloud deployment and allows you to manage your Chargepoint infrastructure and interact along the mobility value chain in the cloud to support collaborative end-to-end business models and processes. This solution, therefore, provides access to the physical Chargepoint that represents the software piece for connecting all business processes around the Chargepoint. It enables business scenarios for remote Chargepoint operations, e-fleet management, 360-degree driver view, and technical Chargepoint asset management. In this currently highly fragmented market, there is a need for a standard software platform which connects to all necessary players and stakeholders, providing a secure, compliant, and scalable software piece, connecting the ecosystem of players in the EV charging space. And e-mobility will help companies to focus on their core business model and processes, providing the best charging experience for the end user. SAP E-Mobility is a solution that helps companies to operate electric vehicle charging infrastructures at scale to drive the transition to sustainable and convenient electric mobility. It enables the management of 3 main end-to-end charging scenarios, such as charge at home, charge at work, and charge at public. With our first release, the scenarios charge at home and charge at work are available. E-Mobility thereby focuses on a multi-persona scenarios reaching from private to public charging. It enables companies to become Chargepoint operators and interact along the mobility value chain in the cloud, connecting business partners and stakeholders to support collaborative business models and processes. Along with the integration into core business processes such as reimbursement, companies can build, run, and monitor their own EV charging networks from end to end on one platform without the need to outsource the service to a costly service provider. I will come to that in a minute in more detail regarding the charge at home scenario. And our overall vision is to connect all necessary and relevant players on one platform and allow for a business process orchestration of any charging process, overall simplifying the charging experience for the end customer. With SAP E-Mobility, we now provide a standard SAP solution, which ensures stability, security, and compliance in all business processes around charging your vehicle. SAP E-Mobility is an industry cloud solution built on the SAP Business Technology Platform and delivers with the integration to the Intelligent Suite solutions real business value for our customer. But let's have a look on the example of charging your car at home. So charging your car at home is the most convenient, most straightforward way of charging. Many companies today provide their employees a corporate car, including a fuel card, not only for business purposes, but also for private use as an additional corporate incentive. With an electric vehicle, a company may want to offer their employees the possibility to charge their corporate electric vehicle at home. This relieves the charging infrastructure at the workplace and may reduce, therefore, infrastructure investments for the company. However, how can an employee get reimbursed of their electricity cost when charging the corporate car at home? SAP E-Mobility, with an integration into SAP Concur, our travel expense management, an employee can reimburse the costs which incurred by the charging event at their home. The employee authenticates him or herself at charging point at home by, for example, swiping the corporate ID card or the charging card to start the charging process. After the charging session, an employee can reimburse the electricity costs of charging the car within 3 clicks using SAP Concur, for example, on his mobile phone. The reimbursement then takes place via HR payroll and fully stays within SAP business processes. With the integration of E-Mobility into SAP Concur, we can ease the integration into corporate finance processes. So there's no need for the involvement of a third-party payment provider. It's overall reducing the complexity of the reimbursement process and providing cost benefits. With SAP E-Mobility, we address a wide-ranging customer field. So E-Mobility is across all industries and therefore, if you will, industry agnostic. We address with the solution scope the industries ranging from oil and gas, utilities, automotive OEMs, logistics sector, and corporate, but also public fleets. The key customer segments for the first release are mainly the latter segment, so specifically corporate fleets across industries which are getting electrified in view of the current sustainability drive of reducing CO2 emissions. E-Mobility thereby provides a leading solution of how to avoid CO2 emission by first not producing any emissions in the first place. And summarizing, our solution is most interesting for corporate fleet managers or corporate fleets, benefit or commercial fleets, which are getting more and more electrified. So let's have a look on the next slide on which specific roles our E-Mobility solution is centered. So having in mind the complex technical and business processes, as well as the overarching electric vehicle charging ecosystem, as shown on the previous slides, a simplified value chain can help to understand on which roles our solution is focused. There are many different representations of the EV charging value chain due to a very strong and very fast growing market with many players having different background across industries. Further, many market participants take on more than one role along the value chain with regards to charging an electric vehicle. But starting from the left, almost every value chain begins with the production and supply of energy, which eventually flows into the electrical car. A classical utilities industry routine. The next step, the physical hardware, the Chargepoint needs to be developed, produced, and sold. So this job is done by the so-called EVSE companies, typically having strong utilities background, partly also automotive. In the next step, the hardware needs to be delivered and installed. Typically also EVSE companies or general contractors will provide the service. When it comes then to the part of ownership of the site or the assets, the Chargepoint, it can become complicated. So where and how can be different. Site and asset ownership can fall apart, but do not necessarily have to be. So that's really depending on the customer situations. Various models here are existing in the market and also possible. This can also depend on the role of the Chargepoint operator who will operate the asset on site. So SAP E-Mobility solution focuses on the two last roles, the Chargepoint operator and the EMSP, the E-Mobility service provider. I will explain those two rules in more detail on the next slide. So the CPOs, the charging infrastructure operators, set up the charging networks. They onboard the Chargepoint hardware from a large number of providers and ensure an optimal EV charging process. They provide the charging network infrastructure, manage backend technologies, and the connection between the chargers to ensure reliable and consistent charging of electric vehicles. The CPO customers are the e-mobility service providers, the EMSPs, who manage the relationships with the electric vehicle drivers. An e-mobility service provider, EMSP, offers electric vehicle charging services to the EV drivers. They provide access to charge points within the EMSP's network or other networks via e-roaming. The CPO is the role at focus of our first release and of our e-mobility solution, providing the capabilities of administration and management of charging infrastructure for companies. So with SAP E-Mobility, your company can become your own CPO. This is particularly interesting for companies with a conventional combustion engine car fleet who would like to electrify their fleet becoming fully electric. Companies with electric fleets can incorporate the CPO role for themselves. So meaning to manage the Chargepoint infrastructure by themselves and charge intelligently by integrating into your existing business processes, business systems, and also charge sustainably by, for example, achieving your business decarbonization objectives for sustainability KPIs and fleet goals. Let's take a look at our solution. So e-mobility is a very simple solution in terms of user interface, and operations. The main application for Chargepoint operations consists of several building blocks. First one being the Chargepoint device management, which allows you to monitor the charging infrastructure and charging session status remotely. It also communicates bidirectionally with a vendor-independent charging infrastructure through the Open Chargepoint Protocol, the OCPP. The Chargepoint device management allows you a simple onboarding and configuration of your charging stations. Our software is hardware agnostic, meaning that any hardware which is based on the OCPP can be connected to our backend software. With the charging session management, we'll give you a full transparency of charging processes, the energy costs, and the power grid utilization. It allows you to reduce energy costs and conduct power grid compliant charging with a real-time intelligent load management. With the badge management included, you can provide EV authorization for users and drivers via badge mass uploads. Last but not least, with the Chargepoint statistics provided, gives you a detailed overview and insights of your session history of the charging sessions. So this includes the overall consumption in kilowatt hours, the usage in hours, inactivity of charging stations, costs, and much more. SAP E-Mobility thereby constitutes the basic software puzzle piece of connecting the charging station as a physical hardware to the business processes around charging an electric vehicle. SAP E-Mobility is an industry cloud solution built on the SAP Business Technology Platform, as mentioned before. And the SAP Business Technology Platform is the technology platform for the intelligent enterprise, which allows customers to build, integrate, and extend business applications. SAP E-Mobility runs on the infrastructure of your choice, so being it the SAP data center or any other large hyperscalers. As said before, with SAP E-Mobility, we have built a puzzle piece bridging the charging hardware toward the business processes. With the integration into the Intelligent Suite, E-Mobility supports going forward all major charging scenarios. Additionally, we collaborate with several partners on partner solutions supporting and also complementing SAP E-Mobility's scope and offering. Summarizing, E-Mobility allows you to first manage a complex business network based on proven business processes, integrates in corporate and business partner processes. It is an extensible and open for partner and custom solutions, and it builds on an open business technology cloud platform. Overall, in summarizing, SAP E-Mobility supports the transition towards the electric powertrain for businesses and private electric vehicle drivers by providing a cloud-based Chargepoint operation services end-to-end. SAP E-Mobility thereby enables companies in multiple industries to build, run, and charging networks, including billing, maintenance, and energy management, to drive the transition to sustainable and convenient individual mobility. The benefits of SAP E-Mobility include greater support for the business decarbonization, for sustainability KPIs and corporate fleet goals, and efficient onboarding of new infrastructure, which will save you costs and time, and a reduced total cost of ownership due to the flexibility of utilizing various EV supply equipment vendors. With the integration of the business processes around the charging station into the SAP portfolio, E-Mobility allows you to basically depict the major charging processes which are required. With that, I come to an end and would like to thank you very much for your attendance and interest on the topic of E-Mobility. I hope you find this presentation interesting and helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to raise them or write them in the chat. Also, if you want to learn more on the topic of sustainability, I was asked to provide an overview of additional resources on the next slide. So you can find more information and material on the topic of sustainability via the listed links on the slide within the, for example, SAP integrated report on the SAP purpose and sustainability community page, and also on the commitment to the United Nations global goals in our interactive webbook. So thank you very much. And with that, over to you, Menina.
Thank you, Johannes, for all the great insights. Yeah, we do actually have the Q&A time now for everyone. I already see one question posted, actually two, but this is also the time for you where if you want to speak up, it's sometimes easier to explain. If you want to get in touch with us, then raise your hand. You should see that button and I can then unmute you. Let's start with maybe a question that came in chat. So in chat, there was a question about are there any North American customers of SAP E-Mobility? And by the way, Johannes, you haven't seen it, but for everyone that's watching the recording, then on our sap.com product page for E-Mobility, you can learn more about the product and also read customer stories. But maybe, Johannes, you can just shortly answer on that.
Sure, absolutely. So they're not official North American customers already using SAP E-Mobility, but we are in close discussions with several customers regarding SAP E-Mobility. So this solution is focused to start in Europe first, as it is also a rather young solution, but it will come to the North American market soon, and I think also expand to reach there. So we're in very close discussions of rolling out E-Mobility also in the North American market.
Good. Then we have another one in Q&A. Anthony, thanks for the question. And the question is, does the SAP E-Mobility product and solution factors in the parking fees for the public charging infrastructure?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think it also pictures you. I mean, if you use public charging infrastructure, right, we see, at least here in Europe, a very complex price and tariff model depending on your EMSP and also the Chargepoint operator. We hope that this will get simplified. However, we certainly, with the integration to subscription billing and also SAP Commerce, we will feature that functionality that within the role of an e-mobility service provider, you could also implement those kind of price models and also tariff structures that allow you to factor in, such as, for example, the parking fees into charging your car, for example. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Then there's another question that came in chat by Catherine. Thank you. Do you track any CO2 emission, for example, per charging session within the SAP E-Mobility?
Yeah, so the CO2 emissions cannot be tracked or measured directly, but e-mobility allows you basically to have a detailed view on how much kilowatt hours electricity you have consumed by charging a car, and thereby indirectly allows you to make calculations about the CO2 emissions reduction by charging cars compared to using conventional combustion engine cars.
Thanks, Johannes. And yeah, we've already posted some helpful links in the chat, as you also saw in the presentation, about additional resources. For any further questions that you may have, I mean, after this call or yeah, whenever, feel free to connect with us. The experts and the community is around. Go to community.sap.com/topic/sustainability. This is where you can post your questions, see already asked and answered questions, and also all the resources such as blog posts, news articles, further resources that Johannes pointed out. A big thank you to Johannes, and also to everyone that participated, took the time to watch, and also for those that have asked their questions. So thanks and have a good day. Hope we see you soon in one of the upcoming community calls.
You're welcome. Thank you.